Hi there, and welcome to Proverbs 31 Wannabe, where we discuss biblical womanhood in our constantly busy and sometimes crazy daily life. I'm Alexis Heaslip, and as a wife and mother of two, I am always striving and praying to be a Proverbs 31 woman of faith. Thank you for bearing with me for my 2-week hiatus. I was finishing up finals, and we got a puppy, so I've been kind of really busy, but school is out. I have like a 3-week break until summer. Summer classes start, and I'm really excited, and I'm glad I had this break because it gave me 2 weeks to do a deep dive into an amazing book of the Bible as we continue in our journey of women of faith. And today we are going to be looking at the book of Ruth. I am so excited to talk to you guys about the book of Ruth because there's so much just hidden gems in this story in the Bible. So let's dive on in, y'all, and do a deep dive into Ruth and why she has her very own book of the Bible. Okay, so as we look at the book of Ruth, I first want to start with a little bit of context because it's pretty much kind of in the beginning, right after Joshua has died. For those of you know, Joshua was the leader of the Israelites after Moses. And so this is after Joshua's died, and this is in the time of the judges. And the judges were kind of like the spiritual leaders of Israel at this time before there was a king. So this is before Saul, this is before David. And the judges were there because just like in the desert, the Israelites kept questioning God. They kept turning their back on God. And so God put these people throughout this time period in Israel to lead the people back to Him. And the people would be led back to God for a time, but then a judge would die and they would go right back to not listening or obeying the word of God. So this is the setup for the story of Ruth. And I really like how at the end of Judges, it says, "In those days when judges governed, there was no king in Israel, and every man did what was right in his own eyes." So this is the main issue of the hearts of the people, and this is the backdrop that leads into the story of Ruth. And so the story of Ruth, it takes place during this time, and it starts with a woman named Naomi and her husband. And just like the people that we hear about in the stories in Judges, they don't trust God either. And instead of sticking it out in Bethlehem during a famine, they decided to take their own fate into their own hands. And they left Bethlehem and moved to Moab. Now, we know from previous chapters of the Bible that the people of Moab were not people that loved God. They were people who worshipped many gods. They were people who did not help the Israelites after they had departed Egypt. And so these were not nice people, and they relied, this Jewish family relied on Moab and the people of Moab instead of relying on God. And because of this, Naomi's husband died, and her 2 sons died, and she was left with their widows. And one of those widows was Ruth, and the other one was Orpah. And so this is where it takes place. Ruth was not a Jew, she was a Gentile woman. So this whole story in the Bible is focused on a woman who was a Gentile. And that is really, really cool to me because this story is going to show how God really does love everyone. Everyone who believes in Him can come to know Him and be saved. And that's really the beautiful message of this story. And so Naomi tells her daughters-in-law to go back to their people, and Orpah makes the choice to leave. But Ruth does not. Ruth, out of her love of God and out of love for her mother-in-law, makes this really bold statement. And she says, Don't urge me to leave you or turn you back from following you. For where you go, I will go, and where you lodge, I will lodge. Your people will be my people, and your God, my God. Where you die, I die, and there I will be buried. May the Lord do the same to me, and more also, if anything but death separates me from you. This proclamation of Ruth's faith and her resolve to stay with Naomi is really a powerful statement, and that is why I really like to look to Ruth in the book of Ruth as to what it means to be a woman of faith, because she shows characteristics of loyalty. She shows characteristics of dedication and persistency and sacrificial love. She left with Naomi to go back to Bethlehem, back to the land of the Israelites, and she left her whole family behind. She left the places that she grew up in. She was heading to a place where she knew nobody, but because she was faithful, she stuck out with her mother-in-law, and that is something that really just leaves an impression. And you'll see how her character stays constant throughout her story. Now, you would think that Naomi would have been inspired by Ruth, but instead she literally tells people to call her Mara, which means bitter, because she was bitter about everything that happened to her children and husband. And it's really, I think, ironic, because Ruth, the foreigner, imitated God's love better than his chosen people. Ruth, throughout this whole story, shows hope and a desire to have persistency and sacrificial love for Naomi, where most of the story Naomi is bitter and mopes about. And I just think it's really cool that we can see that not just the Jewish people, but anybody who turns to God can find rest in him. So we get to Bethlehem, and we meet a really important person in the story named Boaz. And Boaz was a highly esteemed member of the community, and he owned a field. And as we know from Jewish law and Leviticus and Deuteronomy, when you own a field and it's time for harvest, you're supposed to leave the pieces of grain or fruit or whatever behind in the field so that widows and orphans don't starve and they can go and glean the field. And because of this law in Leviticus and Deuteronomy, Naomi told Ruth to go glean the field so that they could have something to eat. And this is how she met Boaz. And Boaz was a relative of Ruth's husband. And what I really like about the book of Ruth is that there's so much in the story that relates back to the law. And I feel like as Christians, sometimes we tend to overlook a lot of the things that are in Leviticus and some of the things that are in Deuteronomy, because we know that Jesus is the fulfillment of the law, and that is really a beautiful thing to be able to rest in. But in order to really understand a lot of the Bible, I feel like as Christians, we need to have a better understanding of what the first 5 books of the Bible really do say, because without a firm understanding in that, we lose some of the importance of things that are said in other books of the Bible, like in the book of Ruth, how we're going to talk about a redeemer. What does that even mean? How could I know what that means unless you know the laws of redemption that are in Leviticus 25 and 27 and Deuteronomy 25? So I'm going to quickly talk about Boaz and his role, and then we're going to look at Leviticus. So what happened was that Boaz and Ruth meet, and he treats her with kindness. He treats her with dignity, and Boaz made Ruth a part of this community. And he made sure that her and Naomi had enough to eat, and then some, and he made sure that she did not want for anything, and he made sure that she was safe while gleaning the fields. And it's not Ruth's outward beauty that attracted Boaz to Ruth. What's really interesting is we see that Boaz was attracted to Ruth because of her honor and dedication to Naomi, her mother-in-law. That is what attracts Boaz to Ruth. And it is Boaz who approaches Ruth, not the other way around. And what's really, really cool is that he even blesses Ruth and praises her for caring so much for her mother-in-law. In chapter 2, verse 12, Boaz says, "May the Lord repay you for your kindness, and may your reward be full from the Lord, the God of Israel, under whose wings you have come to take refuge." And Ruth was just amazed by this, and she goes back to her mother-in-law, and she was shocked about how much grain she had, and she asked Ruth, like, where did you go to work? Blessed is the man who took notice of you. And this is where things get kind of spicy, because Ruth tells her that she went to Boaz, and this is when Naomi tells her, this is a man, is a close relative who can redeem us. And she wants Ruth now to go to Boaz in the middle of the night, uncover his feet. And that back then was a symbol saying that you want to get married. So I'm going to pause for a second, and we're going to open up and look at Leviticus 25. We're going to go to Leviticus chapter 25, verse 25. So if you will turn with me there, because this is the question, what does it mean when someone is a redeemer for a person? So Leviticus 25:25, and it tells us this: if a fellow countryman of yours becomes so poor he has to sell some of his property, then his nearest relative is to come and buy back, redeem what his relative has sold. This is the law of redemption. And back in the day, during this time, a woman was considered property. And so that means the property of her husband. And since Ruth's husband had died, she would have been redeemed and could have been redeemed by a family member so that her lineage and her husband's lineage wouldn't die out. That is the law of redemption. And this is where Boaz really shows his character of excellence. So Ruth goes and asks Boaz to redeem her. And because Ruth is a Moabitess, he could have said no. He could have been cruel and mean, and he could have just ignored Ruth and told her off, because in the Bible we learned that Moabites and people who were descendant of Moabites were to be excluded from the assembly of the Jewish people. And that there alone could have made Boaz not want to have redeemed her, because then his children might have been discriminated against because of their mother's heritage. But Boaz does not do that. Instead, he tells her that he wants to redeem her, but he has to make sure this other person who is a closer relative doesn't want to redeem her first. And so, because Boaz is a man of honor and intelligence, he goes to the person, the closest relative and redeemer, and asks him in front of everyone in the town square, and he asks him if he would like to redeem the property and redeem Ruth. And he reminds this person, we don't even know this person's name, that he would have to not just redeem the property, but also redeem the Moabite woman, Ruth. And this relative answers in Ruth chapter 4, verse 6. He says, I cannot redeem it for myself, because by marrying a Moabitess, I would jeopardize my own inheritance. Take my right of redemption yourself, because I cannot redeem it. And my study note for this verse tells me the excuse given was probably made upon the spot by this relative redeemer to avoid the obligation of marrying Ruth and raising a son in her deceased husband's name. He may very well have not wanted to raise a son under such circumstances or be married to a Moabite woman. Unlike this relative, Boaz was a man of dignity and strength and honor. And he redeemed Ruth and married Ruth. And he ended up being so blessed by the Lord for choosing to redeem this woman. Now, what's really cool is I know that Hebrew names have a lot of meaning behind them. So I actually took the time and looked up what the meaning of Boaz's name meant. And according to Jewish texts that I read, the name Boaz actually means, in it is strength. And I think that is such an appropriate name, because Boaz was full of strength. He was full of strength from the Lord, and he loved the Lord, and he upheld the law, and because of that, he was truly blessed. I love how this book of the Bible closes out, because all the people at the gate and the elders end up blessing Boaz and Ruth in this story. And let's turn to Ruth chapter 4, verses 11. And it says, all the people at the gate and the elders said, we are witnesses. May the Lord make the woman who is coming into your house like Rachel and Leah, the two who built the household of Israel. May you achieve wealth and power in Ephrathah and become famous in Bethlehem. Further, may your house be like the house of Perez, whom Tamar bore Judah, because of the offspring which the Lord will give you by this young woman. So Boaz took Ruth, and she became his wife. And he went to her, and the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. Then the women said to Naomi, who was once bitter but is now full of joy again, Blessed is the Lord, who has not left you without a redeemer today, and may his name become famous in Israel. May he also be to you one who restores life and sustains your old age. For your daughter-in-law, who loves you and is better to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him. Now, what a beautiful end to this story that started off so sad. And the book doesn't just end with this happy ending and blessing here. What's really amazing about the story, it just shows you that how one person's choice can have such an impact on history. Because this isn't just one story about Ruth and Boaz and Naomi. No, this story shows how a Moabitess woman's faith and an older gentleman's faith in a time when there was so much unfaithfulness leads to the lineage of David, because these are the descendants of Perez. Perez was the father of Hezron. Hezron was the father of Ram. Ram was the father of Amminadab. Amminadab was the father of Nahshon. Nahshon the father of Salmon. Salmon the father of Boaz. Boaz the father of Obed. Obed the father of Jesse, and Jesse the father of David, the king of Israel, and the ancestor of Jesus Christ. If it wasn't for Ruth's courageous and bold declaration saying, "Your people are my people, your God is my God," and if it wasn't for Boaz's decision to uphold the law, David, the king of the Jewish people, would not have been born. And other parts of the Bible would have never happened. And the lineage of Jesus would have to have been different and not as beautiful and messy. And this just really, really shows me, and I hope it shows you, that everything we do should be due to glorify the Lord. Because when we follow the will of God, so many beautiful and amazing things can happen. God, thank you so much for the gift of the book of Ruth. Lord, you are the author of this story, and I thank you for giving us such a powerful and poignant reminder that when we follow your will, amazing, powerful things can and do happen. Lord, I pray that I am able to have the boldness of Ruth to declare that no matter the circumstances, you are my God. And I pray that I have the courage, like Boaz, to follow your will and to listen and obey your commandments, even when nobody else around me is. Lord, thank you for showing us that even in the mess and turmoil of life, we can be bold and courageous, and we can be like Ruth and Boaz and be faithful and just be men and women who try to honor you. Lord, Ruth really is a Proverbs 31 woman, and she was a woman of excellence. Lord, I pray that you can use me and mold me so that I may be even slightly like Ruth. Lord, help me and help all of those listening to strive to be women of excellence, just like Ruth was. Amen. Thank you for listening to Proverbs 31 Wannabe. We hope you enjoyed the program. If you enjoy our show, please rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or on anywhere that you listen to podcasts. Find us on Instagram and Facebook, and check out our website at www.proverbs31wannabe.com. We would love to hear from you, especially in the comments. Be sure to come back next time as we discuss one of the judges, Deborah, a true warrior woman for the Lord. Until then, this is Alexis Heaslip, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. God bless.